Welcome to Nicer Education. I'm Pam Gothard, Professional Learning Director, and I'm delighted that you could join us for today's session on Active Classroom, Getting Started. Active Classroom is your answer to everything social studies. Let's take a look at our agenda for today. We're going to talk about how do you engage students with the activities in Active Classroom, and then we're going to look at how do you create your classes, register students, and assign work digitally to them, and then using Active Classroom and whole class activities. Let's start by logging in to Active Classroom. If you haven't been into Active Classroom yet, that address is www.active.socialstudies.com. We're going to log in using our email and password, and then we are sent to our home page. It's here on the home page that you'll notice the pop-up that is hopscotch. It's a great way to learn more about Active Classroom, but for today's session, we won't be using hopscotch, so I'm going to click the X there and get rid of it. Let's go to our gray toolbar at the top, and from our gray toolbar, we're going to select Content and Find Activities. Click on Find Activities, and on this page, we're going to put in the criteria by which we want to search today. I'm going to use U.S. History and the Gilded Age, and then I'm going to click Search. I've chosen to use the Gilded Age because as a former high school teacher, I remember so many times when I get to this era of history, I just had the hardest time finding really good, rich resources. So I chose Gilded Age for that specific reason. So let's take a look at what we can find that meets that criteria. Okay, so as you can see here, there's quite a lot that meets the criteria for the Gilded Age. And if we look here, you'll see that there are 5 pages of resources, and that's about 100 activities available to our use. Let's take a look first at what I want to show you is a decision-making activity. It's one of my favorite activities in all of Active Classroom. We're going to use the one today that's on page 4 of our choice of resources, and we're going to use specifically this one called Decision-Making in U.S. History, the Gilded Age Strikes, 1877 to 1894. When we open this up, we're going to see that the strikes are going to provide for us an array of information in the table of contents. It's here that we're going to click on the student handouts and take a look at what this particular activity has to do. Now, one of the things we're really focusing on in our session today is using inquiry-based learning and how within Active Classroom there's all this richness about inquiry-based learning. That's one reason why this is one of my favorite activities. This activity really stretches the kids. It makes them think. It makes them problem solve. Makes them really use those critical thinking and higher order thinking skills. So when we open this up, what we're going to see is we're presented with a real life problem that a real life individual had to deal with or a group of people had to deal with. So let's open this up. And we see that our first problem that we're going to explore is called, Will You Strike in 1892? Now, the problem is that you are the leader of Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers Union. You are one of 800 steel workers in the Carnegie Steel Plant that's at Homestead. And there's about another 3,000 workers there, but they are unskilled workers, so they're not part of the union. And your union contract has just expired with the Carnegie Foundation, but this one is ran by Mr. Frick, and you are trying to negotiate with Mr. Frick about this new contract, and he is not as interested in negotiating as you are. The previous contract had dropped your work hours from 12 hours a day to 8 hours a day and gave you steady raises as the price of steel increased. However, the price of steel was on the decrease, and 2 of the plants ran by Carnegie were already being run by non-union workers, and so their products were being cheaper than yours, and they had become more automated. So Frick is not your friend at the moment. So Frick, not too interested in exploring this option with you, is offering you instead, he's offering you a cut of 15% and to delay the contract negotiations until December 31st. Well, now, why do you think Frick wants to delay this until December 31st. Okay, the plant is in the north. It's in Pennsylvania, just outside of Pittsburgh. December 31st, you're going to have colder weather, and it's going to be harder for the workmen to strike. So he's very interested in postponing this negotiation. So here's what you have to decide. You have to decide what you're going to do as the union leader there in Homestead. Should you accept the pay cut and agree to go back to work, try to negotiate further with Frick, or call a strike including union and non-union, skilled and unskilled workers? So let's say for a moment that you give this out to your students. Now, at first, this is going to be a really tough task for them. Well, actually, all the way through, it's going to be a tough task for them because that's the idea of it. It is a problem-solving, inquiry-based activity. So you might want to let your students work in pairs just so that they can have somebody else to kind of bounce ideas off of and kind of sharpen each other as they go through this process. So think for a moment. You're giving this out to your students. They're taking on this role of the union leader, and you've got to make this decision. Now, as students, you can ask the teacher, you can ask me, one of the 5 questions below. Let's look at those 5 questions and think about which one do you want to ask. And in the chat section, if you'll text me in the chat section which one you want to do, I'll tally the scores, and that's the one that I'm going to go over with you. So which of the questions do you want to ask? Number 1, is Carnegie still making a good profit? Number 2, does the public support the workers or the owner? Good questions. Send me those chats. Let me see what vote you get. And that's the one we're going to go with. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of different ones, but one number is popping up more and more. Okay, it looks like you guys are going to go for question 4. So, question 4. The answer to, let's go back to question 4 for a minute so that I make sure to give you all the answers. Do we have a good chance at keeping the strike breakers out of the factory? Can we hold out longer than Carnegie? Well, let's see. First of all, Frick has sped up the production of steel plates in the factory, which requires skilled workers. The work with the steel plates is accomplished by unskilled workers. So he has a plan in mind, right? He also built a wall around the factory. And not only did he build a wall around the factory, he put gun outlets in it so that he could actually fire down on people if it was to get stormed. The other 2 plants that belong to Carnegie are non-union plants. They cost less to operate and they're more automated. So that's your information. Now, you would let your students now grapple with and work with what are they going to do about this problem. Now, how much time you give them to do that is going to be up to you. But I would suggest at least about 10 to 15 minutes because you really want them to work through this and give reasonable answers, not just off-the-cuff answers. Once you've done that, you've given them time to work through this, you now want to come back with them and you're going to give them what actually did happen. So what actually did happen in Homestead? Well, they did go on strike, and the strike was going well until, yeah, you guessed it, violence erupted, and a number of Pinkerton men, these are like private detectives, are killed. And so now the governor is contacted, and the governor has to send in part of the state militia to get the situation under control. And so by doing that now the strikers are in a bad light, and they have to negotiate with Frick. And so they do. They negotiate with Frick. Frick now gets them to take the pay cut, and they go back to working 12-hour days. Now, the last part of a decision-making activity is great because it brings together now and gives you some primary source that's related specifically to this situation. So here you can see that our primary source is a telegram from Andrew Carnegie to Henry Frick talking about what to do or what might be done. And here the students answer just one question about the primary source, but it's a good deep question. So A good activity for really getting your students engaged in inquiry-based learning is like you provide them the resources and then you're letting them work through this problem solve on their own, ask questions of each other, really dig into the situation, really try to frame something that makes sense. And so it's a great inquiry-based learning activity, and it's a really great way to start off a unit. You want to use the decision-making activities before you get too deep into your study, because you want the students to not have as much background information as they'll have a little bit later. So let's take a look now. Let's go back to our active classroom. And now let's think about another selection. Well, I'm going to stay with this idea of the Gilded Age because, like I said, as a former teacher, just always had trouble finding really good resources for this. So I want to come back in here and find another resource to use for Gilded Age. We're really focusing in today, though, on those inquiry-based learning, putting that information out in the hands of the students and letting them grapple with it, letting them come to the decision making on that. So this time, we're going to scroll down the page a little bit, and we're going to be going here, and we're going to say, okay, this time we need to go over a few pages, and we're going to find History Unfolding. And in History Unfolding, we're going to select this one here. It's Or Predatory Robber Barons. Or Predatory Robber Barons. Let's open that up and take a look. And when we open it up, we're going to go over here to our table of contents and get our introduction so that we have a little bit more information. So we get our introduction here. This is a really important piece of any of the history unfoldings. You really want to make sure that you go over this introduction with your students because it builds that background knowledge that they're going to need as they go into analyzing these different images. Now, the orange box down here at the bottom of the screen is very important because in this orange box, we are connecting all the different illustrations in this title and showing what they have in common. These in particular are showing what are sometimes called robber barons in a much more, in that role of being robber barons, industrial giants. So let's take a look at our first illustration. Now, when we first open an illustration, we've already read background knowledge, but now we have background information about the image itself. So we want to be sure that we take a look at that too, because as a good historian, we want to know as much about our source as we can. We want to know what we have, where it came from, and then investigate it. So we're going to read our background information, and then we're going to click on our picture. Notice where it says click on the image to analyze. We're going to open that picture up, and we're going to be able to analyze this in a whole class setting. I really don't want kids to do this on their own because there's so much in here. I really want to have that classroom discussion. Some kids see things in art that other kids just don't see. I want to give those kids an opportunity to really shine and help the other kids find nuances that they may have not noticed. So here we've got our first image, and look, one of the first things we want to do is look at our tools here on the right hand side of the page. These are our image examiner tools, and the first one is a magnifying glass. And here I've taken the magnifying glass just to show you what one area of the picture looks like. And we can use that magnifying glass and go over the whole picture. It's a great way to investigate it, really look deep at the resource. Well, let's see what else we have. If we go to that second tool in the image examiner, we've just increased the size of our picture and made it a little bit larger. When you're doing whole class discussions, this is one really nice way to do that, is by enlarging the image and giving the students a little bit larger picture to review. There's a lot of written information in here, a lot of nuances, a lot of information for us to analyze. So let's take another look. We're going to go back to our tools again, and this time we're going to use that third tool there on the right, and that's our quadrant tool. We're going to look at just one quadrant of the picture at a time so that we can really see that detail. Look at this. If we hadn't have done this, I'm going to go back here. Really, right now, you don't notice so much where it says hard times on the bottom right of your screen, but let's see. When we do this, it makes it so much more visible. So now we can really get in there and see a little bit better of these details that are associated with the image. Now, once we've done this in whole class discussion, we've really analyzed and dissected this image. The next thing we want to do then is we want to do the student questions that go along with it. Let's look at the type of questions that are included with this image. We have interpreting meaning, another interpreting meaning, and then we have an interpreting meaning and point of view. These are good questions and questions that have important skills that we want the students to utilize. Let's go ahead now and go to our second image. Oh, and by the way, if you don't have time to do all three images, do one. Pre-select the one you want to do. Sometimes we have to modify what we have and make it fit our time frame, so modify is necessary to make it fit your time frame. Let's go to image 2. And image 2, we're going to do the same thing we did a while ago. We're going to look at the background information on the illustration. We're going to read that. We're going to talk about it, know the background of where it came from, who the author was, more information, and then we're going to open our image by clicking on the picture itself. Now here, we're going to use our image examiner tools again, and I'm going to take it and use this second tool here and go full screen. Now, looking at the full screen version is a really good way of being able to view this one. The octopus is Standard Oil, and it has its tentacles around everything in the picture except one thing. What one thing does it not have its tentacles around? Did you find it? You're right. It's in the lower left bottom portion of the picture. And the only thing it doesn't have its tentacles around yet, but is reaching for, is the White House. So let's look at our questions about this image. We have interpreting meaning. We have interpreting meaning and contextualizing. And then we also have another interpreting meaning and point of view. So good questions that we want the kids to really dig in with. We really want our kids to learn to ask good questions, but we can't expect them to ask good questions if they're not used to seeing and hearing good questions. And I know as a former teacher, coming up with my own good questions, it's like I would have to sit and really think about that for a little bit. Like, what is the critical thinking I really want to occur here? I mean, that can take some time. So being able to have these already pre-made and ready to go is just another one of the advantages of using Active Classroom. Let's look at our third image. Here's our third image. We're going to read our background information, and then we're going to open our image by tapping on the picture. And here we have, this is JP Morgan, and some of us might anyway, associate him with the Pied Piper. And we're going to dissect this picture by using, again, that middle button. We're going to use, I think actually I'm going to use that bottom button. My arrow's off just a bit. I'm going to use quadrants on this one because I want you to look at the picture. And the focus really is on Morgan and on those who are following him. But what's going on up on the hill? Like, it's really not part of the main part of the picture. It doesn't draw your attention as quickly. So let's take a look. Interesting. Who are the people on the hill? And why are they there? Do you think that students would have paid any attention to that if we hadn't have used something to bring that to the forefront a little bit more? I'm thinking probably not. So I think this is a great way to really get in and look at our images and look at our questions. Here's our questions. Let's take a look. Interpreting meaning, point of view and judgment. If we use these three illustrations and the questions, and then look at our Common Core standards, you're going to hit about 4 or more Common Core standards by using this one activity. One of the other great pieces of Active Classroom is good skill-based questions, good skill-based opportunities are embedded in all the activities. And no, they actually weren't designed for Common Core. This was actually made prior to Common Core, but it's just good history instruction. It's what good historians do on a regular basis. So it's what we want our students to be able to focus in on. Let's go back to our set. And now that was a very skewed image because we saw that we were looking at those men as robber barons. And one of the other things I really like about Active Classroom is that it brings to the table a lot of different perspectives. This time we could actually take a look and look at this same type of group of people, but look at them as captains of industry. Let's take a look. We'll take this look a little bit briefer than what we saw before, but still go through it. So again, what's important on the main page is that we're not only going over the information, but also looking at what's in that orange box. That orange box tells us that we're now looking at these men as captains of industry. Vanderbilt was an incredible man. He was born very poor, and he raised himself up by the bootstraps, as the saying used to go. Here's our first illustration, and it is actually of Vanderbilt. Let's read our illustration information and then open our image. And here we see Vanderbilt. And we're going to use that magnifying glass and zoom in just a little bit. And we see that we pulled that sailboat out of the image just a little. Get a little bit better look at that, because that is actually how he began his fortune, was by ferrying people across the river. Let's look at the questions associated here. Like I said, we're going to go through this one a little bit quicker because it looks the same way as any other history unfolding now that we've been through it. But we want to look at what it offers in terms of questions. We have interpreting meaning, and then we have point of view and judgment. And let's go look at our next image. Okay, now in this image we have two people. We've got Carnegie and JP Morgan, and we're going to open that up, and here's one of them now. And as you can see, these images aren't as intriguing as the images in the previous set, but that doesn't mean that these are any less important. They still have a lot to tell us about the people involved and how they're viewed by society. So here we look at our questions, and we have identifying facts, and we have interpreting meaning and point of view. So again, good, rich, skill-based questions that we want to have our students do. Our third image here is Thomas Edison. I believe one is Ford and the other one, I don't remember his name. Let's take a look. We would read that information here. Oh, it's Firestone, about our image, and then we would open that image up. And because it's a portrait or a snapshot of men, there's not a lot going on in the background as it was in some of our other images. Probably our best tool for using this is still using that full screen version. And then we're going to look at the questions that are associated with this one. This one's identifying facts, and I love this one, drawing conclusions. So we're really having our kids work through some good skill-based questions, seeing good content. If you had done just these two activities here, history unfolding, looking at the people involved in the Gilded Age, you've really covered a lot already about the Gilded Age. Okay, so a great resource. I have one more resource I want to show you before we get into the functionality of Active Classroom. And this next resource is, again, it's one of my favorites. I know I keep saying that, but I love what's in here. I'm passionate about what they offer students. This next one is a Debating the Documents activity. And we're going to use Debating the Documents, Rockefeller, Monster Monopolist, or Marketplace Hero. I guess you're seeing that theme here, right? So anyway, I think this is a great activity. I really like what this does for students. So let's open that up and we're going to take a look. One of the first things you want to do here is you want to be sure you have the students read this introductory paragraph. It's very important. Really builds that background knowledge that the students are going to need. This piece I would be sure to assign out to the students digitally or make copies, because I want them to engage with the text. I want them to write on it, make notes, make references. I want them to really engage with that text. Let's open that up. And here's our introductory essay. We're going to let the kids devour that on their own, and then we'll have that background to come to the table with to discuss these other options and activities. The next thing is a timeline. And I think this is really nice because kids have a hard time contextualizing, like, what else is going on besides this one event, because it seems like in social studies we can sometimes sound like this is the only event occurring at the time. But this is just one event or series of events that's occurring along with lots of other stuff, just like what's going on in the media today. So we want the kids to have a good background on the context in which this is occurring. So now you're going to see on that table of contents over on the left that we're looking at visual primary sources, documents 1 and 2. Now notice here that they've combined 2 documents into this one. We're not looking at them separately, but as a collection. We're going to, again, do like we did in History Unfolding, but keep in mind we're now debating the documents. but we're going to look at the information on those documents before we go in and look at the documents themselves. But then we're going to open them up the same way. We're using that orange box at the top, and we're opening up those images. Now, this image has a lot going on in it. So we have a lot going on in the image. Maybe we want to use that magnifying glass. So we're going to just bring those images up, and now look, you can see the images a lot better by using that. Let's look here. Oh, you can see there the image a little bit closer. And then let's look at our next image. Now this image does have some detail, but I think a larger version of it would give us what we're looking for. So let's use that larger version. And yeah, I can read things pretty well there. I think that's a good version to look at with the image that just doesn't have a lot of detail. And our questions for this one are going to be main idea or topic, visual features, and again, visual features. Let's see what else we have. We also have background information. Okay, so now we've reviewed those two images in whole class. We've dissected them as a group. We are now ready to answer the questions. You could have the kids answer the questions on their own, or you could have them do it in pairs, small groups, or whole class, whatever works best for you in your time frame. Now, after we've done these two, we're going to do the next set of images. Notice over your table of contents, we're going to visual primary sources, documents 3 through 5. Now look at this set. Very different than what we saw a while ago. This time we get 3 images. We're going to read all of our information about our 3 different images so that we know what they have to do with one another and kind of how they came about being. And then we're going to open our images and start with the first one. This is a picture of a catalog page from Montgomery Ward. Now, your students aren't going to be able to remember Montgomery Ward probably, but I do. I'm old enough that I remember going and shopping at Montgomery Ward. But what is so important about this? Why is this an important primary source that we're looking at a catalog page compared to the other images we've already seen today? Well, it could be that we're looking at it because we want to look at the price of the lamps, or maybe we're looking at it because we're looking at lamps rather than candles. So there's been some progression. I don't know. What do you think? This is what the students need to think about when they're having that whole class discussion. What do you see and what do you not see? What's missing or what is it in place of? But really get your kids stimulated with asking and answering good questions. The next image, interesting as well. Let's take it full screen using that second icon there on the right. And what's important about this? Okay, so they're cooking on a stove. Well, look how the women are dressed. Look at how the home appears. Well, for one thing, it indicates that there's some influence, financial influence there. So one thing to consider there, but we really want the students to think about not only what they see, but what is intended by what they see, and again, what's missing. The next image, yeah, you guessed it, it's a car. That's one of the people involved here was Henry Ford. Another was Firestone, so don't forget he's important as well. Let's take that to a full screen version, and we can now take a good look at what's going on here and have the kids, again, ask good questions, formulate those good questions. What do they see? What do they not see? What's going on? Why did someone feel like this one was important to include in the collection? What kind of questions go along now with these 3 images? Let's take a look. Got main idea, background information, and I love this, inferencing. What can you infer? I love it. Kids have a tough time with inferencing, and actually so do a lot of adults. So this is a great skill for us to include. Now, if we had done just this, we would have already done a really good exercise. We would have seen some good content. We would have done some good skills. What's really great, though, about debating the documents is what comes next. Look at your left-hand side over there. We're looking at our table of contents, and here's where we're going next. Now, as a student, you've got to decide which set of primary sources is the most important to a historian trying to understand the impact of Rockefeller and his Standard Oil Company on the nation in the late 1800s. Which one is most useful to a historian? Now, at this point, this is great because now your kids have to make a decision. They've got to make a judgment, and it needs to be a good informed judgment. They've got to choose which documents they would select, 1 and 2 or 3 through 5. What if all of you take a moment and pick which set you would choose? I bet the responses would be mixed. But let's see what our next step is. So now the students are going to say, I chose documents 1 and 2 or 3 through 5 because, and they've got to cite evidence. They've got to make it persuasive. They've got to make you believe that they chose it because of the right reasons and that their answer is correct. And then they do number 2. I didn't choose documents, whatever. However, a historian still might use those documents in the following way. So the documents weren't thrown out. They're still important, but in what way are they important? So a very important exercise for the students, real critical thinking going on here, inquiry-based learning. This is like the gold mine of teaching social studies. This is what we want our students to be able to do. We want them to be critical thinkers. We don't want them to believe everything they see in print. We want them to analyze it and question it and formulate those good questions and come up with some positive, thoughtful answers. And if we stop here, we've done a great activity. But debating the documents is even better. Look at what's next. Now, we're going to take on written documents, and we're going to do them the same way we just did those visual documents. You're going to analyze them one by one, and then you're going to come back here and you're going to compare. Which of the written primary sources helps a historian best understand the impact of Rockefeller and Standard Oil Company on the nation in the 1800s? Same process, but we're notching up the rigor. We go from looking at a couple of visuals to having to compare, bringing that rigor level up. Now we're looking at written. Written's a little more challenging than visuals. Now we're bringing that rigor up and saying, okay, out of the written, which is the most important. Now, here's where you get the bang for your buck. Now they go to a document-based question. They're going to fill in, they're going to create a 5-paragraph essay. Rockefeller was truly a monster monopolist whose power over the oil industry harmed the public far more than his charitable giving ever helped it. Wow, what a statement, right? Now, the students, though, have to say, do you agree or disagree with the statement and why? Bam! That's the kind of learning we really want them to have. So this is an exciting way to get your students really involved in critical thinking and engaging in active classroom. I love what active classroom brings to the classroom, and it just provides such a wealth of information. I've only given you 3 resources today, 3, and there's so many more for you to dig into, but I hope I've at least whet your appetite. So now that I've whet your appetite, I hope you're all ready to get your classes created and get going with active classroom. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create your classes. We're going to go to People in the gray toolbar. We're going to click on Add Organized Students. People, Add Organized Students. And then we're going to come to this page. And as you can see, there's a hopscotch here. We're going to just close that out and get rid of hopscotch for the time being. You can always come back and watch that later. And here, what we are going to do is we're going to go down to this orange block where it says New Student Class. And this is where we're going to click and create our new classes. So click on New Student Class. Great. Now we're on the page where we create our class. I want you to ignore the first 2 columns. We're not concerned about them at all. I want you to come right here, and I want you to put first period. First period right there in that blank. And then you're going to create New Student Class by clicking on the orange button. And look at this. So easy. Look there at the left-hand side of my screen. What do you see? There are the classes that we just created. That's how easy it is to create your classes in Active Classroom. Now, all you have to do is go back and go through those same steps for however many classes you actually have, whether it's 4, 6, however many classes you teach. Absolutely easy. Now, Registering students is almost as easy. Looking a little further up the page there, look at that. See where we now have that highlighted link, you're going to give that to your students, and they're going to self-register for Active Classroom. Yep, that's it. Self-register, give it to the kids, let them do it. It's real easy. They don't register for any base class but yours. The only thing they have to select is which period they're in. So really teacher-friendly and student-friendly platform as well. So you get those kids registered, and now we're ready to assign out some of that great work we just looked at on Gilded Age. Let's go back over there. So we're on Content, Find Activities, and here we are on the Gilded Age. Let's assign out to them that debating the document, because we really want them to engage in that introductory essay. So let's go down here and get that one. And we're going to click on the symbol of the man in order to assign that to our students. So here we come to our assign page. And in that first column there, remember when you just created your classes? Bam, there's your classes. Who are you going to assign it to? First period, second period. Who are you going to assign it to? You click those check marks. And as you click those check marks, those classes move over into that middle column. And that's where you've got your students that are going to be receiving the lesson. Now, over on the right, where it says student instructions, that's where you tell the kids what it is you want them to do in this lesson. Now, for this one, when they read that introductory essay, I want them to use the highlighting features to highlight anything that relates to Monster Monopolist and robber barons. Oh, and I think I actually meant to make that robber barons and men of industry. Sorry about that. Should be two different ones. Okay, so we're going to have them do that highlighting. So what we're going to do to create our highlighting for the students is we're going to click on that orange button that says Highlights, and here is where we start building our highlighting. Now, like I said, we're actually not going to use any of these pre-made selections. So I'm going to click on those X's and get rid of those. I'm just going to delete all of those that were ready-made. And I'm going to start by creating my own. And I'm going to start with Marketplace Hero. I'm going to start with Marketplace Hero. I'm giving it a color. I did a drop-down menu for my color, and then I added my highlight. I added my highlight using that orange button there. And now I'm going to do that again and add my other colors that I need for this particular lesson. I'm adding Monster Monopolist. I did add highlight, and now I click done, and I'm going to return to where I'm assigning that out to my students. The only thing I have left to do is fill in my unlock date, which is when it will be available to the students, and then a due date is to when it will be closed to the students. I'm telling you, this is teacher friendly. You've just got to get in there and play with it a little bit, but you are absolutely going to love what you can do with and for your students using Active Classroom. Let's do just a little bit of a review. Where did you go to find the activities? We went to Content, Find Activities. Where did you get the link to register your students? We went to People, Add Organized Students. What symbol or column do you use to assign the work out to the students? The column is called Assign, and the symbol is a picture of a person. Now, the last question was today's lesson interesting and engaging? And I certainly hope it was. At the conclusion of the webinar, you will be prompted to fill out an evaluation. I would really appreciate it if you take a moment to complete that evaluation for me and give me some feedback. I hope that you experience Active Classroom in the same way that I have and fall in love with it the way that I have. I think it's just an exciting way for us to reach our students with meaningful instruction. And I know that's what all of us are striving to do. Again, I'm Pam Gothard, Professional Learning Director for Nystrom Education. A recording of today's session will be posted at www.nystromeducation.com/learning. I look forward to attending another of our webinars in the near future. Have a great day, and I hope that today has been meaningful to you.